2017, I traveled to China. Don't ask me what possessed me to go to China, but I went there with some friends, and we were all African American. We weren't Chinese. We went there though for a 17-day period. I, as a student of history and as a student particularly of civilizations, I've always been fascinated by the Chinese civilization because it has existed for so long, as in 5,000 years or more. And you can say what you want about the Chinese. If they've been around for 5,000 years, they've learned to do some things that work, and that's something that we can actually learn from, we can benefit from. I'm not saying that obviously everything that they do is good, or their particular form of government, which is communism, is something that we should embrace. But their structure, the way that they approach how they keep their civilization, their society, their country together, we, at this time in America, when we're coming apart literally at the seams, when people are talking about taking up arms against the government as recent as Monday and Tuesday of this week, people are seriously talking about engaging in acts of civil war, which are further acts of treason. We can learn something from societies that have been around for 5,000 years, not 500 years, 5,000 years. The average lifetime or the lifespan of an empire is about 300 years. If you look at all the empires that have ever existed and you average them out, the average lifespan is 300 years. America has been around for 250 years, give or take. We're on the backside. If all things hold steady in terms of the trends of society, we are performing in such a way to suggest, to strongly indicate that we're not going to surpass that average. And I'm just talking strictly objective data and what I see in human history. And when we look at a country or a nation or an empire, if you want to call it that, like China, the question is, how did they manage to do it? Well, one thing is that one of the indicators that a nation is going to be around for a long period of time is the degree of commonality that the citizens share, or the degree of adhesion. And we'll talk about that in future lectures. We only have 2 more, but we'll talk about it. The glue, the natural glue, what is it that bonds people together? Because whatever that glue is, that's an indicator of whether the people are going to be able to stay together over a long period of time. The thing that holds China together, it's not magic, it's not political ideology, it's blood, it's sanguinity. 90% of the people that live in China has about 1.4 to 1.5 billion people living in it. The number one glue that has held any civilization together, if you look at all of the civilizations that have ever existed, the number one glue is blood, meaning they're related. 90%, there are different ethnic groups within the nation of China, but 90% of the people who live in China are members of the Han, the H-A-N ethnic group. So essentially, when you talk about an ethnic group, what you need to understand is that that group descended from one person. In other words, 90% of the people in China, 1 billion of them are family. So that's a cue, and we don't have that in the United States. Diversity can be a strength, but it can also be a weakness. We'll talk about that in terms of what Daniel saw in his prophecy. King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a great image, and when Daniel constructed, which means interpreted, that dream, he looked at the feet, which were part clay and part iron. And what Daniel said is this is the revelation that God gave Daniel. The feet that were part clay and part iron represented people who were of diverse ethnic origin, living amongst each other, mingling but never clinging. So it's interesting, and this is just some side reading that I encourage you to do, and we'll talk about it more later, that when this great image, which represented all the empires that had ever existed, or the superpowers, at the time that Nebuchadnezzar was living, all the way to the end of time. So that when you look at that prophecy that is in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, and you look at it very carefully, what you need to understand and appreciate is that it's futuristic as well. In other words, it's not complete. But what is striking is that that image was struck not in the head where the brain is. You would think if you're trying to kill something, you hit it in the head. No, not in the chest where the vital organs are, the heart and the lung. No, hit it on the feet. And the feet represented a diverse empire where people mingled, but they never cleaned. See, that's the issue that has always brought down most empires. It wasn't the lack of a common set of political ideas, because that is a type of adhesion, or that's a type of glue that holds people together, but it's the weakest form. Family, blood is the number one. The second thing that holds people together over time seems to be religion. If you're a Christian, you gather under that flag. If you're a Muslim, you gather under that flag. If you're a Sikh, you gather under that flag. If you're Hindu, you gather under that flag. So religion is a glue, but it's not as strong as family. Political ideology, i.e. we believe in democracy, we believe in a republic democracy, or some Republican form of democracy. When I say Republican, I don't mean as in the party, I mean as in a government that is an indirect democracy, where we elect people who go to Congress and make decisions on our behalf. That's a Republican form of democracy. Whatever our alleged ideology is, it's the weakest form of glue, and I'm using that term metaphorically, meaning that which holds people together over time. Political ideology is the weakest form of glue. And unfortunately, folks, in this country, that's the main thing that we have. We don't have blood, and at this point, we can't really say in all honesty that this country is a Christian nation, even though we claim to be, but America is becoming increasingly secular. I do a lot of digressing. I'm going to read the scripture, but I'm just sharing with you. So getting back to China, I'm studying China, and I'm struck by the fact that they've been around for 5,000 years. And I'm further struck when I learned through the tour guide who was giving us the full story of China. He tells us that 90% are Han Chinese, which are their one family. So, but what really impressed me about China, or I don't say impressed me, but it moved me, it caused me to think, was two things. One was that on the state-run TV, they were showing images of black people, particularly black men that were being beat up by the police. And they were saying, this is what America is really about. On the state-run TV in China. This is what democracy actually looks like on the ground in America. And I remember having a conversation with some of the white people that were traveling with me who were from the United States, and they were certainly put out by that presentation of America, and they wanted to have a conversation. And I was like, bro, they're not distorting things. They didn't make up something. These weren't what we call deep fades or deep fakes. I can't recall which term it is, but it's when you create a video and you make it look like it's real, but it's actually made up. They were showing actual images. So if we don't like for America to have a bad name and a bad reputation around the world, then we need to behave. We need to conduct ourselves according to these lived out, or these alleged principles of freedom and inclusion and equality that we say we believe in. So I was struck by the fact that the Chinese were calling us on that. Almost every time that I turned the TV on, I was seeing some image, and it was always a white officer, and for the most part, a black man being beat up by the police. So that's what Chinese people think about us in America, by the way, because we give them that opportunity. But the next thing that's more positive that I want to talk about is that I was struck by is they were talking about their 100-year plan. The Chinese have a plan, and that's dovetails into our lecture, our session today. They have a 100-year plan, at least minimally a 100-year plan. I'm struck because in this country, we only think in 2-year increments, general election and midterms, general election and midterms. We don't have vision, And we're just hoping that things will work out for us, when in fact, hope is not a plan at all. Hope is not a strategy at all. We need a plan, we need a vision. And the plan has to come from or flow from the vision. So as you listen to this lecture, and you will have the opportunity, and I really would like to get your input when we get to the backside, because question number one is that I'm going to ask you is, what is your vision? If someone were to ask you to write a 100-year vision for Black people in America, in other words, 100 years from now, if everything that you wanted to see happen for Black people in this country was happening, what is that? What does it look like?